June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach, Normandy. The sea was the color of cold iron, and the sky above it held the silence that always comes before history breaks open. From the gray horizon, landing craft moved toward the French coast, small, trembling silhouettes, carrying men who did not yet know which of them would live to see nightfall. Among them was a 21-year-old medic named Waverly Woodson. Shrapnel already burned through his thigh, his back, his side. The soldier beside him was gone. The landing craft was dying under him, torn open by a German shell, blood mixed with seawater around his boots. But even then, before his feet touched the sand, Woodson's purpose had already chosen him. He should have waited for evacuation. He should have sought shelter. Instead, he reached for his medical bag. When the ramp dropped and the cold water swallowed him, he ran toward the sound of screaming men. The air was alive with machine gun fire. The sand leapt in bursts. The surf was red. Woodson's body was failing. But his mind became surgical cutting through fear, through pain, through everything except duty. He dragged drowning men from the tide, one after another, 4 times into the killing water until his arms no longer felt like his own. He turned a crater into an aid station, a place where agony could breathe for one more minute. He amputated a leg with only morphine and determination. He tied tourniquets with trembling hands, slick with his own blood. He worked for 30 hours beneath a sky stitched with tracer fire, saving more than 200 lives. He spoke no prayers, only questions that mattered. Where are you hurt? How can I help? When he finally collapsed, pale and empty as the tide withdrawing behind him, the beach was quieter. The guns had not stopped, but so many men still breathed. Because he had refused to stop later, doctors said he should have been dead within an hour. Instead, he lived long enough to return to England, heal and ask to go back to France, back to the same war that had nearly taken him apart. The 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion. His unit became first and only African-American combat unit to land in the first wave on D-Day. Their hydrogen balloons rose over Utah and Omaha beaches like strange, silent sentinels, pushing German aircraft higher into the sky where Allied guns could reach them. Eisenhower himself praised them. History for a moment seemed ready to remember them. But paperwork has its own kind of artillery. Somewhere between General John C. H. Lee's endorsement and the desks in Washington, the recommendation for Waverly Woodson's Medal of Honor disappeared, a page misplaced. A signature withheld the quiet machinery of prejudice, turning faster than any weapon for the white medics who performed similar miracles. The medals came quickly. For Woodson, there was silence. No Medal of Honor, no Distinguished Service Cross, not even a line in the record that said he was there. They raised 150 balloons across Omaha and Utah within 24 hours, each one a target, each one a shield. They watched fighter planes bank, saw tracers streak through the clouds, and heard the impact of every victory explode above them. But their names, most of them, were never written down. After D-Day, they kept going, through France, through Belgium, all the way into Germany, where their balloons floated above captured cities, keeping the skies clear for Allied bombers and supply planes. The 320th Battalion was deactivated quietly in 1945. No parade, no public thanks. Their paperwork filed under support units, their heroism buried under bureaucratic dust. In the eyes of the Army, they had done their duty. In the eyes of history, they simply disappeared. But memory has a way of resurfacing, especially when truth demands it. It began with small acts, historians unearthing photographs, journalists tracing forgotten unit rosters, families keeping old medals and letters in boxes marked Normandy. Each piece a fragment of a story waiting to be remembered. By the 1980s, veterans began to speak up. Men who had been told their stories, didn't matter, finally stood before cameras and said, "We were there." They described the balloons, the fear, the pride, the contradiction of wearing a uniform. For a country that called them unequal, their words brought the 320th back into light. And among those testimonies, Waverly Woodson's name appeared again and again. "He saved me." He never stopped. He was the bravest man on that beach. For Joanne Woodson, his widow, the fight for recognition became her own war. Decade after decade, she sent letters, gathered affidavits, and spoke to anyone who would listen. Her voice, calm, patient, unshakable, carried the weight of every man her husband had saved. In 2023, she stood at Arlington National Cemetery, her hand resting on the flag that draped his casket. She said softly, "It took the world a long time to see him," and then she smiled because finally it had. The story of the 320th is more than a footnote in military history. It is the story of America at war with itself, a nation that could send its sons to fight tyranny abroad while denying them equality at home. But it's also the story of what happens when courage refuses to vanish, when the truth, no matter how long it takes, rises like a balloon into the sky. And so, as we remember D-Day, we remember not just the generals or the grand strategy, but the men who worked unseen beneath the gunfire, the medics who stopped the bleeding, the engineers who raised the shields, the soldiers who fought 2 wars at once, one on the beach and one in the heart of their own country. 80 years later, the wind over Omaha still carries their story. If you listen closely, beneath the roar of history, you can hear it. The hiss of gas-inflating balloons, the echo of Woodson's voice calling for another bandage, another life to save. The world had changed. Wars were over, nations rebuilt. The beaches of Normandy were quiet again. But for the men of the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, silence didn't erase memory. For decades, their deeds lingered in private letters, fading photographs, and the quiet pride of those who survived. In 2024, a new generation began to ask questions. Historians, documentary filmmakers, and military enthusiasts started piecing together the story of the 320th. They dug through national archives, poring over after-action reports that never mentioned names. They interviewed surviving families. They found journals, letters, and medals tucked away in boxes labeled Normandy 1944. And one name kept emerging: Waverly Woodson, Jr. A medic, a soldier, a hero, yet, officially, he had received only the Bronze Star. But those who survived alongside him knew his courage was beyond any medal. He had pulled wounded men from burning sand under machine gun fire, risking his life again and again. In the chaos of D-Day, he had saved countless lives. Advocates and historians campaigned tirelessly to recognize him properly. Letters were sent, petitions drafted, senators lobbied, veterans groups rallied. They argued not just for a medal, but for history itself to correct decades of oversight and to honor a man who had been invisible in official records for far too long. Finally, in a historic ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, more than 80 years after D-Day, the effort came to fruition. President, military officials, and family members gathered. Medals gleamed under the sun. The crowd was hushed when Waverly Woodson, Jr. was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Tears flowed freely. His widow, Joanne, now in her 90s, accepted the medal on his behalf, her hands shaking, her heart full. She spoke softly. He fought for a country that didn't always see him. Today, the world finally remembers. The recognition was more than a medal. It was a correction of history, a testament to courage that could not be silenced. For the men of the 320th, it was a long-delayed vindication, proof that heroism does not fade, even when the world forgets. Across the U.S., schools and museums began telling the story of the 320th. Documentaries, books, and articles highlighted the Sky Guards, the all-black battalion, whose balloons had kept the skies clear for Allied forces, and whose bravery had been hidden for decades. Today, their legacy endures in 2 ways: through history books that now tell their story honestly, and through the inspiration they provide, a reminder that courage often works quietly without applause. In the face of impossible odds, the lessons of the 320th reach far beyond military history. They speak to resilience in the face of discrimination, to duty in the face of danger, and to the power of recognition delayed but not denied. They remind us as the sun sets over Normandy and the wind whispers through the trees. The silver balloons seem to rise once more in memory. They drift above the beaches where men once ran under fire, and they shine brightly as a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and enduring. Legacy, the story of Waverly Woodson and the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion is now complete in the historical record. But their spirit and the truth of what they did will forever soar in the skies of memory. The Story of the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion is not just a tale of war, it is a story of humanity, of courage, perseverance, and the slow arc of justice. Historians today reflect on the battalion's experience as a mirror of America itself, nation fighting tyranny abroad, while struggling with inequality at home. The men of the 320th faced two battles, one against the enemy and one against the prejudice that sought to erase their contribution. Veterans who survived the war spoke quietly of their experiences, often hesitant to claim the spotlight. For them, recognition was secondary to duty. Yet through their stories, a powerful lesson emerges. Heroism is often unseen, and its impact immeasurable. Educators now use the 320th's story in classrooms to teach about courage, perseverance, and racial justice. Their history encourages students to ask questions about whose stories are told, whose are forgotten, and whose are deliberately ignored. The battalion's balloons, once symbols of wartime strategy, have become symbols of resilience. They remind us that protection can take many forms, sometimes visible, sometimes silent, but always critical. Documentary. Filmmakers and authors continue to explore the battalion's legacy through interviews, archival footage, and recreated scenes. They bring the courage of Waverly Woodson Jr. and his fellow soldiers to life. Each story is a thread in the tapestry of history, revealing the hidden heroes of the past. Their legacy has transcended war. It is now part of a broader conversation about equality, representation, and the importance of acknowledging the contributions of those who have been marginalized. 4. Modern military strategists. The 320th is a case study in innovation and adaptability under pressure. Their balloons may have seemed simple, but they were a lifeline, a barrier between danger and the troops on the ground. Their tactical significance reminds us that every role in war, no matter how overlooked, has profound consequences. Memorials are erected, and museums display artifacts. From the battalion, the story of the 320th endures. Visitors pause before the photographs, the medals, the letters, and remember that history is made not only by generals and politicians, but by those whose bravery saves lives every day. In the end, the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion teaches a timeless lesson. Courage does not seek recognition, yet recognition is necessary to honor truth. The country he had saved could not yet look him in the eye. He came home anyway. He finished his education. He married Joanne. He built a life in medicine, turning blood into knowledge, injury into healing. He spoke little of Omaha Beach when asked. He smiled softly as if the memory belonged more to the sea than to him. Decades passed. The war aged into black and white photographs and folded flags. But injustice, like shrapnel, sometimes waits years before it surfaces again. In 2015, journalist Linda Hervieux began digging through forgotten archives. Through ash and microfilm and silence, she found what had been lost: the recommendation, the witnesses, the proof. A senator took up the cause. Petitions rose like signals into the gray sky of bureaucracy. 20. Brought a small acknowledgement, a combat medical badge. 2023, a ceremony at Arlington. And then finally, September 24th, 2024, the White House, Waverly. Woodson was gone. But his wife, Joanne, 94 years old, sat beneath the lights of the East Room as the president placed the Distinguished Service Cross before her. 8 decades late, America spoke the words it should have spoken in 1944. In that moment, the story of Omaha Beach folded back on itself. The young medic in the surf and the old woman in the White House became one. Story of courage denied and finally reclaimed. The searchlights of history had taken 80 years to find him, but when they did, they carved the night open like scalpels. Normandy, June 6, 1944. As the sea turned red and the wind tore across the cliffs, above the chaos, silver balloons began to rise. They were huge, shimmering hydrogen orbs tethered to steel cables, each one floating like a silent guardian above the beachhead. They belonged to the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, the only all-African American combat unit to land in the first wave on D-Day. While the infantry bled in the sand and medics like Waverly Woodson fought to hold life together, these men worked under constant fire, anchoring the skies themselves. Each balloon carried a deadly promise. Any low-flying German aircraft that dared to strafe the beach would meet steel cable and flame. The balloons forced the Luftwaffe higher, where Allied anti-aircraft guns waited. Their mission was unseen, but their danger was real. Hydrogen burns hot, a single bullet could turn a balloon into a fireball. Each launch was a gamble. Each cable they secured under sniper fire was a thread between survival and destruction. The men of the 320th were trained soldiers, but the world they came from was not built to see them that way. They had left a segregated America, buses divided by race, barracks separated by color to fight for a freedom they themselves did not yet possess. And still, when the call came for Normandy, they stepped forward. On the beaches, soldiers called them the Sky Guards. The sand of Omaha Beach has long since returned to silence, yet its memory is etched in the courage of men like Waverly Woodson. Generations later, his story resonates not only as a testament to bravery, but as a mirror reflecting the unfinished work of justice. Military historians continue to study the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, uncovering details that illuminate not just tactics and strategy, but human character. The meticulous records, photographs, and first-hand accounts reveal a truth that transcends medals. Heroism recognizes no color, no rank, no hierarchy. In classrooms, lecture halls, and museums, students and visitors encounter the name Waverly Woodson, Jr. They learn that true courage is measured not in accolades, but in action. They see the medic who ran into machine gun fire to pull drowning soldiers from the surf, who performed battlefield surgery under fire, who worked relentlessly while wounded and yet asked for nothing in return. Across the United States, military installations, streets, and schools have been named in his honor. These gestures, though late, signify an awakening, a recognition that history must be complete, and the stories of those once forgotten must finally be told. Yet the work is not done. The campaign for the Medal of Honor continues, a reminder that institutions take time to reconcile with their past. Senators, historians, and veterans remain committed to ensuring that Woodson's valor is fully acknowledged, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a historical correction. His story echoes beyond military circles. It serves as a call to society to confront injustice, to honor merit and sacrifice wherever it appears, and to understand that the price of heroism is often invisible to those who witness it from afar. Documentaries, books, and educational programs have begun to integrate Woodson's story into the larger narrative of World War II. For every viewer, reader, or student who learns of his courage, the lesson is the same. History is not only made by generals and leaders, but by those who, in moments of unimaginable peril, act with integrity and humanity. The legacy of Waverly Woodson, Jr. is now intertwined with the broader civil rights struggle, a reminder that equality and recognition are battles fought long after the guns fall silent. It is a reminder that valor deserves acknowledgement, regardless of the color of one's skin. As we look toward the future, the story of the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion stands as a beacon. It calls upon each of us to recognize courage in all its forms, to confront historical omissions, and to ensure that the sacrifices of the past shape a more just tomorrow. Waverly Woodson's courage was not measured in medals alone. It was measured in lives saved, in humanity preserved, in the unwavering commitment to do what was right when it mattered most. And in that measure, he remains a hero for all time.